Kevin.
How are you? Look in here.
Aren't we, isn't it time?
I think it's time. I was just looking to see if Jim is on. Don't see him yet. But yeah, we have a quorum. We can start if you'd like.
All right, let's get started. Let's call our meeting to order. Skip the pledge, let's do a roll call.
Okay, roll call. Vice President Hetherington. He's
Here.
there. You are. Greg Morrison. Not yet. President Odette.
Here.
Stevens.
Here.
Aren't we, isn't it time?
Yes.
It's time. I was just looking to see if Jim is on. Don't see him yet.
Okay, great.
But yeah, we
We
have a quorum.
don't have any
Started
visitors,
by-
correct? All right, let's get started. Let's call our meeting to order. Okay. Skip the pledge, let's do a roll call.
Okay, roll call. Vice President Hetherington.
Comments at this time. Do we have the phone number for texting?
Here.
There you are.
Is it 205?
Greg Morrison. Yes, I think it's on the agenda there.
Yeah, it is.
Not yet. President Odette.
Here.
Stevens.
Here.
Is it time?
Yes.
It's time. I was just looking to see if Jim is on. Don't see him yet.
We have to,
Okay, great.
I can do it pursuant to.
But yeah, we have a quorum.
We don't have any visitors,
Started by-
correct? All right, let's get started. Let's call our meeting to order. Okay. Skip the pledge, let's do a roll call.
Okay, roll call. Vice President Hetherington.
Comments at this time. Do we have the phone number for texting?
Here.
There you are.
Is it 205?
Greg Morrison. Yes, I think it's on the agenda there.
Yeah, it is.
Not yet. President Odette.
Here.
Stevens.
Here.
Is it time?
Yes.
It's time. I was just looking to see if Jim is on. Don't see him yet.
We have to,
Okay, great.
I can do it pursuant
But
to.
yeah, we have a
We
quorum.
don't have any visitors,
Started by-
correct? All right, let's get started. Let's call our meeting to order. Okay. Skip the pledge, let's do a roll call.
Okay, roll call. Vice President Hetherington.
Comments at this time. Do we have the phone number for texting?
Here.
There you are.
Is it 205?
Greg Morrison. Yes, I think it's on the agenda there.
Yeah, it is.
Not yet. President Odette.
Here.
Stevens.
Here.
Is it time?
Yes.
It's time. I was just looking to see if Jim is on. Don't see him yet.
We have to,
Okay, great.
I can do it pursuant
But
to.
yeah, we have a
We
quorum.
don't have any visitors,
Started by-
correct? All right, let's get started. Let's call our meeting to order. Okay. Skip the pledge, let's do a roll call.
Okay, roll call. Vice President Hetherington.
Comments at this time. Do we have the phone number for texting?
Here.
There you are.
Is it 205?
Greg Morrison. Yes, I think it's on the agenda there.
Yeah, it is.
Not yet. President Odette.
Here.
Stevens.
Here.
Is it time?
Yes.
It's time. I was just looking to see if Jim is on. Don't see him yet.
We have to,
Okay, great.
I can do it pursuant
But
to.
yeah, we have a
We don't
quorum.
have any visitors,
Started by-
correct? All right, let's get started. Let's call our meeting to order. Okay. Skip the pledge, let's do a roll call.
Okay, roll call. Vice President Hetherington.
Comments at this time. Do we have the phone number for texting?
Here.
There you are.
Is it 205?
Greg Morrison. Yes, I think it's on the agenda there.
Yeah, it is.
Not yet. President Odette.
Here.
Stevens.
Here.
Is it time?
Yes.
It's time. I was just looking to see if Jim is on.
We have to,
Okay, great.
I can do it pursuant to.
But yeah, we have a quorum.
We don't have any visitors, correct? All right, let's get started. texting.
Here.
This is 205, 643.
Yes.
Yeah, it is.
Yes. So today's more of a guidance item today. And then over the next slide, I'll turn it over to Kelly.
Yeah, it is.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Just a quick slide to go through the budgeting process, just to remind everybody. Today is just our workshop to discuss what we're thinking about for 2021. Again, the first actual budget that you will receive is next month in September. Then we'll go on to review in October, and if we need to do any other meetings to
So
chat
today's
about any
more of a guidance
do that, and
item
then the
today.
final will be on
Over the
consent
next slide, I'll
in
turn it over
December.
to Kelly. Yes.
And just want to go over, so these dollars
Yes.
are actual numbers through July, and then our budget that we agreed on for 2020 for August through December. Today is just our workshop to a little bit of budget in here, so this all kind of depends on how we end up revenue and expense wise for the next few months here. So this is kind of a forecast of where we think we're going to end up in revenues in October, and if we need to do any at 18.4, and then on the expense side, estimated as well 14.2. And on the next slide, just want to go over, so kind of based on that same forecasting technique, our actual numbers, I put together a cash flow and our budget that we for the budgetary portion August that on the income statement. So we used August through December, a little bit of budget in there, so this all kind of depends on the balance sheet how we end up looked at last year's historicals through none of the next few months or anything that this is kind of a forecast of where we think we're going to end up in revenues. We're going to spend money on at 18.4, and then on the expense side, estimated as well at 542.
I'm curious because you've got pavement reserve is $1 million, and then we're spending on the budget thing, it was $500,000 for pavement management. So this is just reserve. We'd have $8 million left over at the end of the year. Is what you're saying.
Yeah,
correct.
well, there's a couple ways to think about those reserves. We actually having an $8 million reserve for 1 year beyond what we actually would need. We've always kind of done it this way to kind of match up with what restricted net assets. Another way we could look at these reserves is we as staff could calculate that, based on what we need for a 1 year reserve, and then you would see how much cash you would have left over. But some of those things do aggregate, like in our property acquisition funds, you might want to aggregate that. Open space reserves, you might want to aggregate that. So just a couple different philosophies on that. But this is just to give you an idea that we think we're going to end the year with about $8 million of cash. We think we'll have to fit. And then the second column there with the 5 year, the 2021 to 2025, that is something we put together, going back 6 or 7 years, that many special districts and cities and counties have, just to help the public understand, what are the capital needs for the airport going into the next 5 years. And sometimes they say, why do you have $8 or $9 or $7 in our 5 year capital operating funds? Well, there's $31 million there, and we can take you through any of those numbers and explain kind of where they came from. That is.
Ending 2020, you're saying we have about $8 million in the bank.
That's what we're shooting for. And then the next slide is just a graph representation of that. And with that, I will turn it back over to Kevin to kick off the budgetary items that we received from the directors.
Any questions so far on any of the revenue and expense projections from last year?
Yeah, I've got a question. The 8 million is titled on your slide as recommended reserve recommendation, right? But you're also saying that's what you expect to have?
Yeah, so that's, you know, that's kind of what I was talking about before a little bit, that we could look at this a little different this year and going into future years, where we as a staff, you know, say here's what a healthy reserve is for the 2021 or 2022 budget year, and then here's, you know, the revenue that would be maybe considered surplus. This is a little different than when we designate unrestricted net assets. So this is a pretty high reserve for most public agencies, but when you look at our, you know, 5-year capital operating needs, you know, you can see that there is a need there. But we hope to end the year, and we probably outperform that with around $8.5 million.
And in prior slides, you had, I don't know, was it a $4 million swing or $400,000 swing between income and expenses? It was 14, wait, slow down, go back. So operating expenses, 14 million. And one more back. So that one's 18 million. So this year we're adding 4 million to reserves projected.
Do you want to answer that, Kelly?
Sorry, I had to unmute. Yeah, it's looking like we will add that because we haven't really spent a whole lot of anything yet this year, and we did budget quite a lot, especially on the
swing
grant
between income and expenses.
money. So I think it also kind of depends on where we
slow down,
end up
go back.
actuals versus budget as well, which we
So
may,
operating
we're trying to
expenses,
do
14 million.
as many of those things as we
And one
can
more
by
back.
the end of the year.
So that one's 18 million. So this year we're adding 4 million to reserves. Just for clarity, we must have started the year with 4 million in reserve. Is that about right? If we're adding 4
Do you want to
million?
answer that, Kelly?
Sorry, I had to unmute. Well, I think it's looking like confusing cash and reserves. Add that because we haven't really spent cash a lot of anything yet this year. We did budget quite a lot, audited financials, especially on the, and then this is just saying we're going to end with 8 million in cash. So yeah, we will. I think it also kind of depends on where we end up actuals versus budget as well.
There's also a lot of
Which we
capital.
may-
operating
we're trying to
expenses,
do
14 million.
as many of those things as we
And one
can
more
by
back.
the end of the year.
So that
Yeah,
one's
that was
18
the
million.
best
So
surprise
this
at
year
the
we're
end
adding
when
4
they
million
said
to
they gave us the
reserves.
5
Just
million.
for clarity,
With
we
no
must have started the
match.
year with 4 million in reserve. Is that about right? If we're adding 4
Do you want
million?
to answer that, Kelly?
Okay.
Sorry, I had to unmute. Well, I think it's looking like confusing cash and reserve. Add that
So,
because
where I
we haven't
wanted,
really
this is a little
spent
bit new. We haven't
cash
a lot of
we
anything
were-
this year. We did get some budget opportunity sheets that came in from a couple of board members, and we wanted to give them an opportunity to kind of talk about those. Anything they'd like to say. Some of these things we've included at some level in the budget already. Some of these things are maybe more policy oriented, but are
So that
related
one's 18
to,
million. So this
to
year
the
we're
budget.
adding
But
4
I
million
just
to
wanted
reserves.
to
Just for
give a
clarity,
couple of
we
examples.
must have
We
started the
have,
year with 4 million in
agency
reserve.
partnership
Is that
money,
about right?
community
If we're
sponsorships. We'll talk
adding
about
4
that.
million.
Orlando
Sorry,
project,
I had to
transportation
unmute.
projects.
Well, I think
Slides
we're
later on
it's
some of
looking
those
like
things.
confusing
And
cash
then,
and reserve. Add that
Mary had
because
haven't
haven't
this is a
spent
little bit about
cash
a lot
we
of
were-
things she had on there. It was like forecast of updating our forecast, which sheets that came in that's actually underway. Members we wanted to this year and into next year as we update our ASP. So some of those come up. I think maybe help understand maybe some things that are underway or that are there may be questions on. So with that, maybe we'll turn over to Rick first, and then Mary. Policy oriented, but are
So that one's 18 million. So this year we're adding 4 million to reserves. Just
Okay,
for clarity,
my,
we must have started the year with
kind
4
of
million
looking
in
at,
reserve.
partnership
Is that
money.
about right?
we put $1 million in last year,
Adding
third to third.
Well, I think we're it's looking like confusing cash
housing
add that
and transportation. And
cash
was like forecast of updating
frankly,
our
given
forecast,
our
which,
lack of success in actually getting stuff done in housing, NAHAS is delayed by quite a while. They're studying for 3 months. And we still are committed to Rick Lee, but he's going through a massive massive process with the town. I am suggesting that we put our money in the JPA, which is easier to say than the Truckee Tahoe Workforce Housing Agency. I'm very impressed by frankly, given Emily Vitas and some of the things she's working on, and I suggest we put housing there. But I want to do more in community partnerships, so I suggested $500,000. And I suggested on sponsorships, although we're not spending much because nothing's happened due to COVID, I suggested $100,000 for community sponsorships. And I don't know what to do on transportation. I'd like to kind of hear from Mary on this. In the budget, the things we've already approved is $353,477. If you look at these under paragraph 6, I suggest we put housing there. And housing for Rick Lee Lozando, I do believe that it should be $240,000 if we're going to plan for 6 units, which I'm not sure he can do. And under the Mountain Housing Council, it's $55,000. So those were my comments on. I don't know what to do on the budget opportunities. I'd like to kind of hear from Mary on this. In the budget, the things we've already approved is $353,000.
I suppose I should pull up the budget so I can see what we already have in there.
If you look at these under paragraph 6.
One comment real quick. The community event shuttle is actually 40,000 instead of 30, so we actually have 363,000 in transit. We'll talk about that later. There's a slide on it.
Plan for 6 units, which I'm not sure.
Okay, so this is not where we're going through it, right? We're just, this is high level.
So yeah, just letting my comments on the director know what to do. Give some perspective on some of their requests.
How are these numbers different than what we're doing?
So,
I suppose I should pull up the budget so I can see what we already have in there.
So
it seems,
yeah, I mean, so one comment now, I mean, it varies so much year to year. With agency partnership, we haven't done any agency partnership in 2020. We'll talk about that. We have some that'll be coming up in September for consideration. And then, as Rick said, the housing one, we all we've done is the housing council this year. Putting funding into that. Where we've had the most success is on transit. That's kind of where those are. And then we've spent about 50, 60,000. Mark Lamb can give us the exact number. I can pull it out of the spreadsheet I have here. But on the community sponsorship side, we're well under what we've spent in previous years, but a lot of the requests went away. It varies so much year to year.
I'm good with all these. So what was, we were committed 20 units and 20,000 a piece or 60,000 a piece?
And then,
I forget.
Said, the housing one,
40,000, 22 units, but he hasn't gotten approval from the town to do anything.
Right. So it's sort of just in a pot waiting.
Yeah, and we looked at the length and we just haven't killed it, but it hasn't. We may put the money in there, but I am doubtful that we'll spend it in 2021, but maybe.
I'm good with all these. Okay, so what was, we were committed 20 units.
And then you're up, Mary, to talk about yours.
Okay, well, mine, everything I'm talking about is kind of under the global of our mission statement.
22 units.
You know, and the mission statement, the Truckee Tahoe Airport. So it's sort of just in a pot waiting.
Yeah, and we looked at the length and we just haven't killed it, but it hasn't.
While enhancing the benefit to the
We
community
may
at
put the
large.
money in there, but I am doubtful that we'll spend it
impact on our neighbors.
21, but maybe.
It was missing. I don't know, I forwarded some of those next door comments around, and it blew up. I think at that point there were maybe 50. It's up over 100 150 units. Some relate to
You're up, Mary. Yeah, to talk about yours.
Some are positive. Okay, well, mine is mine, and it just everything I'm talking about. When I'm looking at the global of our mission focus,
22 units.
you know, our culture, our board, so it's sort of just so here, like talking about the master plan. You know, the numbers we've already blown through what the master plan has projected.
The total operations.
No, the how much the last master plan cost us. As long as we can do whatever we want in it. And it blew up, I think at that point there were maybe 50, it's up over 100. Okay, so I'm kind of thinking we should do that. Also tied to that is the resolution number 2004-03, which talked about when jets exceed 15% of the total, then the town, then we should do a new master plan. Like talking about, we've been exceeding the last 4 years. The numbers, and there were some of these that now be it resolved. And maybe we need to bring this resolution back before everybody, but it's this whole thing of, no, the how much the last master plan cost us. As long as we can do beginning of negotiated process and for runway configuration and initiation of appropriate studies. So I kind of think we should do that. Also tied to that, the resolution number 2004-, so I would like to see some budgeting for a new master plan. 15%, so that's the first one. Then we want to do this one by one, so here, the master plan, like talking about, we've been exceeding the last 4 years. The numbers go through.
Yeah,
there was one of these that now be it resolved. And maybe we need to bring this resolution back before everybody, but it's this whole
on the
thing
commentary
of,
for
no,
Rex.
the how much the last
Generally speaking, I'm I am interested in updates
15%, so that's the first one. Then we want to do this one by one, so here, the master plan, like talking
That's all I have to say right now.
the last 4 years. The numbers go through.
Yeah,
There was one of these that now be it resolved. Any thoughts by anybody else? To bring this, that's one resolution back before everybody, but it's this whole thing, not just do the ALP, look at how much the last
generally speaking,
How much?
Well, it was 300,000 last time, so 300,000.
Well, it's
How
gotta
long
be
ago
more.
was that? It's got to be 4.
It was. I need to get the exact number on what that cost. I can get that for you. I don't have it right in front of me, but the plan was adopted in the end of 2015, and it's a 10-year plan, and it would just on the regular schedule it would be start an update in about 2020 and 2023, so that we would have it in place in 2025. There is a process to do an update where you don't do a full master process where you go through it by element, chapter by chapter, and see what needs to be updated. Updates that we would do for the master number will be done with this ALP upgrade. The airport layout plan ALP is one of the chapters of the master plan. It's one of the required chapters at the end. So that just a couple thoughts, but we would probably, for an update, we'd probably spend 175, 200,000 for a full redo of the master plan from beginning to end. It's probably 350, 400.
Was that me?
yeah, who was that? It was maybe.
I assumed it was Kevin. Kevin is spitballing the numbers. I think for the next discussion, you ought to have your numbers more refined for either an update or a full redo.
And to remember, I was on the ad hoc committee with Jim Morrison on that development of that master plan. And we spent a lot of money with the modeling group. And I don't foresee that we would need to do all that modeling. I want us to be looking at this in the context of the impacts on the community and how we are addressing that.
And for because when we look at the numbers here about what's happened with the growth so far ahead of our forecast, I do agree that more than the ALP, perhaps less than completely launching a whole new master plan effort, but yeah, it just things grew much faster than we forecasted.
That was Rick.
We're not sure.
It says Truckee Tahoe Media, actually. Yeah, it's the media guys.
It's the laptop that's in the boardroom, Hardy, that Mike set up. Oh, there it is. Okay.
I think someone just turned it off. Technology.
Great. I'm not sure if what I said came through, but I do support, whether it's we call it an update or a redo or whatever, taking that deep dive into the operations forecast and answering the kinds of questions that are in the slide deck here.
I'm in support of that in theory. I'd like to see the numbers.
Yeah, let me. I can come back in September with some numbers on that, on an update or a new plan, and what those like.
Okay, which ties into our second one, and I don't know, this brainstorm and implement possible strategies. This is, we really do need to be thinking about something. A 3-time increase in 15 years, that's a fact. And if you think out 15 more years, and next door is pretty hot. So that's, I'm just putting it out there for us all to be brainstorming. This is part of our job. This is a big part of staff's job. You know, the culture is to meet the needs of the pilots, but it's also to meet the needs of the people who live in this community. And I want to see a lot more effort and money. What can we do? What should we be doing?
I agree with that. I will say the culture for staff is to look at both of those very seriously. And we spend every day talking about impact in neighborhoods and how we can reduce impact and talking to residents. And so at least our internal culture takes that very, very serious. I'll just put that out there.
Okay, so on to the next one. Unless, you know, anybody has a comment on that. That's just, oh, I had a whole nother page. Yes. Okay, laminate. These are just kind of something that when Jim Morrison had noted, he said, I can't remember if I'm in Fly Quiet 1 or Fly Quiet 2, and he was getting confused, and he's on the board. So to me, these are not big money, but it's like, why don't we laminate and post in each hangar what their, you know, we know how much their rent is. We know, and have a sign that says the community is paying you to not fly between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m. These $40 or $200, depending on which hangar. And the community is paying you another $200 or $400 to not fly between 10:30 and 6:30 a.m. And then if we do a Fly Quiet 3, put that sign up. This is just something that is easy. It could be right next to the button that they have to hold that shows, you know, when they're putting their hangar door up and down. And that takes away the confusion, because it's like, oh, I can't keep it straight. There you go. But Kevin felt this is more of a policy that we had to have agreement by the board. This is what I'm talking about as a thing to think about for the community, to make it easier for pilots to show respect and to be aware of what they're being paid by the community for these quiet hours.
Yeah, I don't know that I said the laminating cards was a policy issue. And that is a good idea. We can do that. We do have very high compliance with those Fly Quiet incentives, but there's no doubt what you're saying, Mary, is accurate, that some pilots at times do have some confusion, but we can, you know, that's definitely something that would not be hard to do. We have other things that are next to the buttons, and I don't have a problem with doing those things.
And the community is paying you to not fly in these hours. It shows that it's not the airport paying, it's the community is wants to buy these quiet hours. And the same sort of thing with the emergency landing areas. That's a great educational tool. Some aircraft are not going to go off ever on 1-1. I understand that. They're not going to go off on 2-0, but many of them can. And I've flown in an aircraft that went off 1-1. It was a piston, and then it turned left and went out over the sewer plant. This is information to get out that is a benefit to the community. And we do a lot of education. We have David Van Quest to educate the community about what we can and can't do when they call in. I'm trying to say, what can we do to educate the pilots to be respectful? So that's, again, another policy issue. Is the board okay with this? Because I think these are types of ideas I think staff could come up with and just implement. We don't have to discuss this.
Well, we have many things like this that we do to inform our pilots and remind them of curfew incentives and others. And as I said, there's pretty high compliance with the curfews already. But I don't doubt and agree that there can be, if we want to do these kind of things from a staff perspective, we're pretty good with that.
Well,
Okay.
since this is a budget discussion, what do you think all of this would cost? Like, how much do we have to allocate this year
Very, very little.
for your checklist?
We can do it. I mean, it's not a cost issue with those two things. So the two laminate, the postings and the hangers.
Okay.
And the website and the literature, tranquility campaign, all this stuff. I mean, it doesn't look like any of it's expensive. We should do all of it.
Yeah, I mean, some of it's way.
Some of it's what, Kevin?
Some of it is already underway. The greenhouse gas.
Okay, awesome.
We're working on that. The educational outreach. You're going to get a report on Mark Covey, his efforts here in the next meeting. I think it's quite extensive. And the simulator. It's a good idea. We can put something out there that talks about how much usage that has. It may be hard to quantify, the overflights, probably, but there's probably a number we can come up with of, how many hours were spent in the sim based on if that wasn't there, would they be flying the plane? We could probably come up with a number on that. So, yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with any of these things that are written.
Greg, don't we? How much money do we have in the budget currently for noise abatement? I mean, do we need to add money to that to do these things?
I don't think so. I mean, there's already, of our budget, it depends on, again, how you classify what is noise abatement, what isn't, or our noise programs, but it's probably up towards $1 million a year, and it depends on how do you put half of the tower in there? I mean, all those things, it's a substantial amount, and, at least the things that Mary has on her list, I don't know that we need to add additional funds aside from the master plan to be able to accomplish these things.
Great.
Particularly the last run to do the outreach to corporate and chief pilots. And I'm remembering when we went to NetJets, and we took a pretty strong contingent, maybe 10 people. We care about this. That was the message that we sent to NetJets, and they created their special. And I'm wondering to do the same thing with these other entities. Mark Covey goes out and does these to groups at San Carlos, at Napa. I'm talking about trying to get to the corporate, the chief pilot, to say it's going to save you money and time to do other things. And we care about this. And so maybe that needs $1 on it to.
So that's included in the outreach program right now. You'll see that in his report that he actually has direct access and contact with a lot of these corporate flight departments on almost a weekly basis. So
in
the next meeting, we're going to talk more about that. And we already have in his budget, we already have funding to continue the corporate outreach that we already do.
Well, I'm thinking the board goes with it, and you go, and we go, and
I've met with folks too. I've met with those corporate flight departments too. But yeah, and we have funds for board travel too. Be able to go do those.
Or we bring those chief pilots here and we meet with them. I'm just trying to brainstorm up these ideas to say, hey, this is in your benefit as well. And how do you develop a special?
We did Mary, I wanted to comment. We did a working group, an airspace working group, where we brought all the chief pilots to the airport here in Truckee. And we schedule a lot of meetings at industry events like the National Business Aircraft Association meeting. So it's pretty economical for us to meet with, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 corporate flight departments in one location when they all travel there. So it cuts our costs down. So many of the corporate chief pilot and community advisory people that are associated with corporate operators, we do meet with in different venues. Very similar to what you and I did with NetJets, I have also accomplished a lot of that in my travels across the past year, which Mark Covey will point out later on. And I do support, I think your initiative is really valuable because we make those strong relationships that kind of last over time that we can build on. So I just want to make sure you understand that we're doing a lot of that, and it just may come in a slightly different format.
I suppose when you're inviting those chief pilots, I think that'd be valuable that the board's included in that discussion. When you bring them on site, the board, it's like meeting with staff is one thing. Meeting with the board is a whole different entity for
Sure.
a chief. And so
no problem
in that.
Yeah, we'd like that. We'll make sure we include you in those meetings.
Thank you. Thank you. Those are my ideas. And it's all tied to that middle section of our mission statement.
Is that the end of the slide?
Hey, Teresa, I just wanted to say that earlier you had proposed, it seems like many of these things are either underway and or can be implemented for pretty low cost, and you were supporting moving them ahead. And I'm with you on that, in support of what Mary's listed and Kevin and Hardy clarified for us.
Yeah, I think to that point, we're always thinking about it, all of us. It's never off our minds, right? Any great idea anybody has, bring it, please.
Agreed. Okay, we wanted to, Kelly, I guess, were you going to cover this one? I think you were going to do this one.
We just wanted to touch on the district goal that we've been talking about this year. And we had spoken about bringing it up at this meeting and how we wanted to address it in the 2021 budget. And basically, as it says on there, the staff recommendation is to use the budget narrative to discuss and clarify the goal. The idea being that there won't be a change to the financial statements, but that we will address this goal via the budget narrative document and speak to the property tax portion.
Okay. Great. And I really do appreciate how you're breaking them out 100, 600, 800, because that's helping me when I look at your monthlies. So thank you for doing that, Kelly. Sure. And then just in terms of, when we do this, there's also the management discussion that's part of, it became part of the audit, and the noise and annoyance mitigation that is part of the whole budget. I really think that whole section really needs to be updated, we'll say. And that could be something I talk with Kevin a little bit more about, since he, I think, writes that.
Yeah, we're open to, any of those ideas on. I think the narrative is a great place to, explain and talk about, how the budget flows through those three different categories. And in the financial statements, as Barry indicated, that there's the three departments that everyone can read, where it gets broken out a little bit. And then we also include a summary. I look at both. I use the summary as much as I use broken out, so that gives some extra transparency and expose, people can read the budget and see what's in there. So we'll work on that for the September one. And again, the September draft narrative will be a draft, and we have two more goes at drafts of that'll come out after that. And so we'll work with the board to make sure that we accomplish this goal.
Great, thank you.
Great.
Any other questions on the district goals?
No, ma'am.
No.
All right. Well, let's talk about some budget opportunities. These are if you remember last year we had a lot of discussion on capital projects that really made it so much so that the budget was difficult to summarize at the end to figure out what we're going to do, what we weren't going to do. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, but we don't have as many aggressive financial line items in this budget, so we think it'll be a little easier to get through. But the first one that we think is an important project is to get this east terminal or admin building parking lot expansion done. We talked a little bit about this last year, but we estimate it's about a 1.6, 1.7, I hope not, but right around there to, maybe go to the next, before you go to the next slide, to get that done. This parking lot would actually accommodate all of the construction that we've talked about over the years in and around the administration building, essentially trying to clearly define an airside and a landside component of the airport, which is a very important aeronautical aviation airport planning term, is that you have airside, landside. So this would kind of clean that up for us. Better public parking, employee parking, circulation, some more pickup drop-off areas. And we were thinking that we'd like to move forward with that project this year. Go to the next slide, you can see what that looks like. And so that's kind of what we're talking about. You can see on there the Hangar 2 project that was talked about, so you can see where that would fit. Hangar 3 would just be south of, or I guess it's south of the parking lot where the word plan is. If we ever decide to do that, the Hangar 3 project, or as we'll talk about here in a minute, this Civil Air Patrol EAA public building, that may be a smaller version, it could also go there, and then you'd have the parking and everything would be adjusted to be able to fit all those things. So that's
Kevin,
what I can include in the budget this year.
Kevin?
Yes, sir.
Rick Stevens. Does this include the expansion of the park?
Yes.
This plan?
Yes. Yes. So the park, this little park expansion, which has been extremely difficult to get started, partly because of slope issues as to where construction goes. We do this parking lot. We'll add that into this whole project and at least get the footprint and then be able to get that equipment installed. So yes, it would include that.
You have $50,000 under number 10 for playground expansion.
Yes.
So used.
Yeah, we would use that to build the actual structure in. But yeah, we'd be able to get all that done with that money and this money to make that happen.
And you would propose doing this in 2021?
This would be the 2021 budget, yes.
So this implies like we are going to do Hangar 2 or Hangar 3, and what is the need for this? If we don't do Hangar 2 or Hangar 3?
Yeah, if we don't, we'll be fine, or we can continue on with how the parking lot currently exists. You can kind of see the lighter gray shaded area there that's kind of in the middle towards the left. That's the current size of the parking lot. And during certain peak periods during the summer, it's full. We actually use the gravel area just to the south of it for employee parking. So we feel that we would definitely benefit from this now. But if the board decided that you didn't want to move forward with it, then we'll continue to function. I think what this is doing is preparing for whatever's built in any of those areas. And we have another building that we're going to propose here in a minute that we would need to do this for also. But we think that it's a good project just for the current use that we have and then future use. Any other questions on item number 1?
I'm going to be redundant and boring. How does this address striving for a low impact on the neighboring communities?
Well, I'll tell you, one way that it does this, and one way we look at low impact isn't just, trying to move away from people's homes is obviously the one that everyone would like us to do, and we'll work hard at that on other initiatives. But another way we try to provide low impact is provide benefit and value. People feel if they can come and benefit from the airport and enjoy the airport, that some of the other impacts that the airport may have aren't as important. And we've been told that by people, not just us thinking that. And, you know, having our restaurant, our park, and then some of the events that we do, people enjoy those. And that can also reduce impact on people.
Well, that's addressing the third part of our mission statement of benefiting the community at large.
I think it addresses both, in my opinion. That's just my
I'd
opinion.
say all three.
Yeah.
I say it's also a high quality aviation facility.
Mm-hmm.
And
So,
Mary, what you're saying, I think there'd be some that would disagree that just because I can have lunch at the airport doesn't mean I'm not impacted by aircraft. I get that. But there are others that do feel that, you know, if there's benefit and value coming from the airport, they're willing to accept some level of annoyance. And we've been told that by many people and members of our community. So, but our goal is to, you know, reduce noise. That's one of the biggest things that we haven't lost sight of that.
So are you looking for us to say we agree with this? Go ahead.
What we could do is we could either, you know, if there's consensus to include it, we can do that one by one. But if you want to go through, you know, all of them, and then we can have a discussion and go back and say, you know, which of these, don't worry about this, don't put this in the budget, we're not ready for it. Yeah, put it in there and see what the budget looks like. You know, those are kind of the two options that from a staff perspective we're looking at.
Okay.
Rick Stevens says I'm willing to put it in until we see the total.
Okay.
I agree with that.
There's two.
Yeah, I'm the same. I mean, there's a point where we will need to step back and look at the big picture. But
I agree. Okay.
Meaning the big picture of the dollars. Sorry.
All right. We will. Okay. Is that Mary?
Yes, it was just right. I just said right.
Well,
the whole enchilada, because the way you worked up option A and B, it's like,
yeah,
it's all kind of combined, but you're saying this needs to be done regardless, and I'm a little confused by all that.
All right, well, we'll take a look at that here as we get through some of these other ones. So the second item, budget opportunity number 2, is this idea of this replacement building for the Civil Air Patrol and CAP. And so just in the last, 3 to 5 months, our thinking from a staff perspective has changed on this, particularly as we look at it in context of the admin building expansion, which is the other thing we're looking at. And that all centers around some of the indications we're getting from the airport district office, the FAA, on grant funding. So just let me talk this through real quick. We're thinking that we might want to move forward with finding a suitable replacement for the EAA building down there that sits in our current runway visual zone, so that we're able to take advantage of the grant agreement that they're offering to replace taxiway golf. So we don't have that yet, but they're saying in our 5-year ACIP Airport Capital Improvement Program, they have got that in, and this coming year is when they want us to start doing some of the design work, primarily on the runway. Now, the runway is not contingent on moving this building, but if we want to accept about $4.5 million in taxiway golf funding, which would come 2023, 2024, that building can't be there. And so that's the question is, are we okay with where taxiway golf is and just leave it alone? Meaning that essentially we're going to be required, it'll be on the airport to maintain that in the future for any reconstruction. And so the question then comes up is, do we want to replace that building? And I should put it out there, we're not obligated to replace the building. We could still demolish it and still, get the money and just tell those groups that, we don't have a space for them. I don't recommend that. I think both of those groups provide a lot of benefit and value to the airport and our community. And I'm hoping we can find another place for them to work. But that's kind of the EAA building. And then I've got another slide on the admin building. And then I've got 2 slides that kind of talk about how these all lay out over about a 4-year period. And so we can pause and just talk about this concept number 2, or I can take you through the next couple of slides.
Taxiway golf is the main taxiway for 220, correct?
Correct.
And somewhere in here there was mention of repaving of 220 and widening, and where did I see that?
Yeah. So that also, I think we've got that.
You know, that
The pavement, I think it's under the pavement maintenance slide. Yeah, it's under the pavement maintenance slide. So, and that adds another level of complexity to this, that with the reconstruction of runway 220, we have an opportunity to lengthen and widen that runway per the master plan, the 2015 master plan. It's unlikely that the FAA will fund the additional widening and expanding, because as a B2 airport, we don't need they say we don't need a 100-foot wide crosswind runway. So they will fund 75 feet, and they likely won't fund the lengthening. But you know, you never know with these folks. You put stuff in front of them, sometimes things can happen, or you get a little bit of funding there. But
yeah, the master plan had like talk trying to get it to 5,000 feet, but in talking to corporates, most of them would not use the 5,000 foot. By their standard operating procedures, they're going to use the 7,000 foot one unless it's closed as of today or in July.
Yeah,
and so lengthening it or widening it, if they won't even use it, is kind of like is it worth the dollars?
Yeah, and I guess I've not heard that they won't use it. There are certain aircraft that won't, but you know, in some of my recent conversations with some of them, there is an interest. You know, again, if the takeoff run available, that's another airport design term, is at 5 feet. It's possible that in calm wind conditions, you could get some of those folks using that runway. We'd have to research that a little bit more and understand. That's one of the things that Mark Covey is working on as he talks with those flight departments on how to get them to use some of our other runways.
What's the
go on, Rick.
What's the width of 220 right now?
It's 4650. Is that right, Hardy? Or 4450?
Oh, it's binder.
4650.
Yeah, it's 4650.
And they would pay to go to 75?
Well, no. So it's 4650 by 75 right now, and what we were trying to do in the master plan is get it to 5,000 by 100, and it does that. The extension that's on our airport layout plan that the FAA is conditionally approved, they're not opposed to it, gives 5,000 feet of pavement. Now it ends up with a lot of what they call declared distances.
Yeah, so it's not really.
But the takeoff run available, landing distance available, all get into that 5,000 feet, which is what they need. And it depends on the aircraft. If they're coming in, it's net jets, and they're coming in a Phenom or a Sovereign, they might use it. But if they've got a Challenger or something bigger, they may still go to the other runway.
Yeah, I mean, I have the master plan in front of me of runway alternative 2A, and what happened was that it brought aircraft too low over 267, and they didn't like that.
There need to be some mitigation on the RPZ, the runway protection zone.
Yeah, so it's, you know, we have to be very conscious before we head down that path about what that runway can do and how much dirt it would take to lengthen it the other way, and how much money that's involved.
Yep, very true.
In terms of the other part of that is we should be keeping very clear statistics, probably through that runway utilization, of which type of aircraft are actually using 220 versus 1129, because that will play into our decision if it's really worthwhile spending property tax dollars to do those things. If they're currently using it, that's an implication that, yeah, going forward, they would continue to use it. If the chiefs are saying, no, there's no way we'd use it. And this is all based on wind, but we need to be collecting that data. and tying to EAA or the CAP, you know, I guess one large section of the warehouse has just become available because Clear Capital's pulled out. And is that portion adjacent to the roundhouse? Because I'm just thinking, you know, my son did the week camp that EAA did, and they made a lot of cool stuff. And I'm just wondering if there's a potential for cross-pollination in the community and EAA if they were to be located in the warehouse adjacent to the rent house, because there's a lot of similar stuff that goes on.
Yeah, that space is leased, so there's a tenant, a market rate tenant in there now.
But it's always flexible. I mean,
yeah, I mean, if there's somebody that.
This is the car museum space. It's been vacated, and you've got a new tenant.
Yes, there's a new tenant in there.
And
Who
how?
is it?
Yeah.
Who is it?
It's the design bar. Is that who it is, Hardy?
Yeah.
Who is it?
The local interior design company that uses it for furniture.
They're using it as a furniture warehouse?
Kind of staging and storage for furniture.
Thank you. What kind? Will somebody send me the rents? Because I always like to look at rents. I'm a landlord kind of guy.
Sure. Yeah, we could send that out.
And I'm looking at that in terms of how big of a square foot is that particular section of the warehouse.
It's about 4,000. How big is that one, Hardy?
It's 4,000 square feet.
4,000.
And how big is their building now?
It's not that big. Well, and when you combine the EAA and CAP, I don't think together they're that same size. There's going to be some occupancy issues in that warehouse with some of the events that they do in their space, but we can.
This is a brainstorming idea of, you know, EAA is kind of its own little section of the community, and Roundhouse is kind of its own little section of the community. And actually having, you know, cross-pollinating, you know, I mean, it's like shared tools, shared visions. You might have people in Roundhouse who might then think, oh, they're doing some cool stuff. I want to be affiliated with EAA. EAA might say, hey, they have some cool tools. Can we work with the Roundhouse? I'm just trying to say, hey, we've got this space. Is this potentially mutually beneficial without building a whole new building for them?
How long is the lease we just signed?
I believe it's a year, or no, it's longer. How long is the lease that we? I mean, it's
5 years with a 5-year extension.
5 years. If you may remember, we brought that to the board about 3-4 months ago and just indicated that we want to use this for nonprofit space, or do we want to use it for market rent? And the decision was to lease it at market rent.
Yes, I remember that, but committing something for 10 years is something you ought to mention to us before you've done it. That's my opinion.
Commit it for 10.
Pardon me?
We didn't do it.
Yes, you did. You gave them the rights to control it for 10.
Well, I think it's got an option. I'll look at that, but I don't think we.
An option is to the benefit of the optionee, which is the tenant. So you've committed to them for 10 years. They may not exercise that option. And I'm kind of curious what you leased it for. And Mary, to your comment about EAA and CAP, that space and the things that they would do, it needs bathrooms, and bathrooms is always an issue in that warehouse. Dry storage was minimal TIs, I assume, but since nobody bothered to tell us about what the lease was, I have no idea what the deal is. I'd like to read the lease.
Okay, we'll get that out to you, everyone.
I'm a lease reader.
And I'm linking the EAA to the Roundhouse because it's all heavy equipment. It's, you know, that to me seems like a good mix.
I think there's potential to do.
As compared to building a new building for $2 million, 1.75, 2.
Yeah, right in there.
Yeah. You know, and then if another space came up in that warehouse to make it for CAP. I mean, you know, those are airport things. That's a warehouse. It's bathrooms. Well, you know, they're on septic tank out there right now on the EAA building. We just increased our sewer line, and we've spent a lot of money to make improvements to the warehouse, and maybe we could make a whole lot of improvements for less than $2 million.
Any other thoughts on item 2?
It's not 2 million, Mary. It's only 1.75 million.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I get it. You know, it's a big expense to try and. I mean, we went through this with Hangar 2, trying to figure out a alternative for moving these uses to a landside location, and doing the office portion of that building was $5.5 million. So we decided not to do that, and really the question is, if we want to take advantage of the federal funding for taxaway golf, we got to figure out a solution to this. We need to start talking about it now, because that's coming up in 3 or 4 years, and in the FAA funding cycle, that's not that long. We don't have to decide it today. I just wanted to put these out there as some of the things we're talking about, some of the things we're looking at. And I guess what I'm hearing so far is not a lot of interest in pursuing what we've talked about now is some funding to look at what the building alternative might look like there.
I totally disagree with that statement. I think we should look at replacing that building and getting them out of the impact zone. That's my opinion.
Okay.
Yeah, I was
agree with
going to
Rick.
say just a little bit more narrative, Kevin, to add to what you said. Definitely support for multiple reasons. A new spot for EAA and Civil Air Patrol. So that's not really the issue. But the issue is, are there some things that we can look at to get rid of that building, still have good facilities for EAA and CAP, and potentially not build a new building? So
okay,
a little bit more narrative or commentary around it for me. The other thing I want to say is I do really appreciate you and the staff taking a 3 to 4 year look ahead. I mean, I understand also we've been talking about this particular issue, I don't know, for 6 or 7 years, but right, you really highlighting a few years ahead, we're potentially at a deadline point if we want to move ahead with the taxiway G.
Thank you. Yeah, that's kind of what all we're trying to get out there today, is kind of think through all these. Yeah. Let me, if I could, let me show you the admin building and then these two, option A, option B, because we're kind of mixing all these together already anyways, and then we can maybe go to the next slide. So again, we're with the admin building, just a quick update on that. It looks like November is when we get the bids to know what that would cost. If you remember going back about 8-10 months ago, we approved funding to do the construction documents and bid it so that we can get a number. I put in these next slides, we'll go to those in a second, about $2 million to do that project. Looking at those numbers again today, the $2 million is roughly what the overall all-in cost. We've already actually spent some of that money. The actual physical construction, we think, will be in the 1.3 range. Again, some of those funds are in this year's budget already. But just to get a bid and to put it back in front of the board. But again, we see this as a priority project, just for staff space and trying to figure out where our staff that we have can have good space to work. We've also recently been exploring, leasing office space right around the airport, and trying to figure out if there may be a solution to some of our staffing issues to move people close by, but not in our admin building. That could free up to maybe do some of these other projects and then look at this again in a few years, or find a permanent solution. There's office condos for sale. There's space for lease. Some of those things are out there. So maybe go to the next 2 slides, then we'll get some comments from you on all this stuff. So I just put this together. There's probably option C, D, E, and F too. There's all kinds of them. But as I was kind of going through this, if we kind of stick with what we're talking about doing, you know, if we started this reconstructing the admin building or putting this addition on, it would take a couple of years to do that. We'd also need to do the parking lot expansion if we're going to do the admin building expansion. Then we would complete it in 2022. 2022, we could also start the EAA CAP. You know, there'd be a public meeting room in there, so we put, you know, public building there. Complete that in 2023, and then we also would like to eventually get a small ground service equipment building. Right now, we use one of our hangars for that. We'd like to eventually move them out of there, put them in in another building. So that you could also, there's a couple other things you could throw in there: traffic control towers, super T hangars, even, you know, extending runway 220. You know, you could also throw into these cycles. But these are the things that we thought would be they're time critical. The next slide is option B, which just talks about, you know, reconstructing the parking lot and then beginning a building replacement for CAP, EAA, those folks, and then doing the admin building later, depending on where those bids come in. So again, there's other options, but we put those out there as some of the big capital construction items that we've got going on. This is not as aggressive as some of the things we had in last year's presentation, where we were still trying to decide if we wanted to build Hangar 2, which was much more expensive. But just they're there for discussion.
How many bids are you getting? Multiple bids for the terminal building in November?
We hope so. We're hoping to get as many people bid on it as we can.
And you say some of the money has been spent already. How much?
It's that the money that the board approved for the design engineers, probably 200,000, somewhere in there. I get the exact number for you. But.
And the terminal building expansion gives more offices upstairs in the terminal building, expands the inside eating area at Red Truck, and does it give them a refrigeration area instead of the closet they use now down by the boardroom?
So that is not part of this particular project. That's another phase, but we're not bidding that portion of it. We decided going back to the board meeting 6-7 months ago that we were only pursuing the addition to the building. It does have a public meeting room downstairs, a second, another public meeting room.
I guess I went and looked at some office space in the Phoenix building yesterday with Kevin and Lauren and Kelly Wu, where we could, in theory, move 4 people out of upstairs to that building, which in the, it's close but not adjacent. And we could lease that, at least the space we looked at, for about $30,000 a year, which is a lot less than $2 million capital expense. That's my comment. It's not a good investment per se.
Yeah, there's that one, and then we also looked at a office condo, which I know Rick doesn't like the office condo idea, but there's an office condo next door that is about $400,000 that you could own. Again, these are all just ideas, concepts. The leasing, you get a little more flexibility. You're not left with that, condo to do something with. How condos appreciate, I don't know. But
what is an office condo?
What was that?
You buy the office, you own it, just like a condominium in a condominium building.
Oh,
and the reason I don't like it is it's harder to do something different, whereas a lease, you cannot renew and move people back onto the airport. That's my point. It's a flexibility issue.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the least, the purpose of this discussion is just kind of looking at these option A and option B and just seeing if there's any preferred alternative that the board would like us to program into a preliminary budget, or if there's things that, it's a waste of staff time to continue exploring, or if there's something you'd like us to to get together and put together for the September meeting. I think my own preference, just looking at strictly from a 4 to 5 years out, I have a hard time passing on $4.5 million of federal funding, so I tend to lean towards this option B. I don't know if a $2 million or $1.5 million EAA building is what we need to spend or CAP, but maybe we do something cheaper. I've actually looked at some really interesting Quonset hut. Don't laugh, but there's some really interesting things you can do with Quonset huts and get some fairly inexpensive buildings that we're also kind of exploring, and that's what we would look at if we did this option B. But again, I'd like to see what the admin building bids come in at. We've got that out there. We're going to get those numbers. So
I'm good with either one. I mean, we can move it around anyway in the future.
Yeah, very true.
What I would like is more information in September about the lease that we just created. How, how I would like Rick to take a hard look at that, because I really do think the concept of that warehouse being used for EAA is promising, and CAP. If 4,000 square feet is more than they both have now, I think that's, and I never thought of it till now, or else I mean, when I saw these numbers, I went, oh my goodness. I would like more information of that as an alternative, if we have to buy out that lease, or if because this is airport needs, if they have a higher priority. I would like to know more about that option. In terms of the lease idea in the Phoenix building or nearby, I think that's an interesting concept.
How big is the hangar, or whatever the ground service equipment building is replacing?
About 4,000 square feet.
So that would open up another rental.
Yeah, we could move them in there.
Be another executive hangar you could lease.
No, or it becomes something that EAA could be in, or CAP.
Well, it's Alpha 9 is what it is. It's
A9.
That's a 35-year-old hangar. It would be more of just another tenant we could put in there or use for overnight.
And A9 is being by Mission to Mars, CAP now, for their stuff. And we park aircraft in there.
The last year we used the November 1 for if I had that right.
Yeah, historically we were using A9.
Yeah, we've used A9 many times.
And we looked at the meters in there.
Is Sierra Aero using Alpha 9?
Yeah,
they are. Sierra Aero is in November 1 temporarily while we redo the roof of Hangar 1. But no, they don't use it on a regular basis. We put them in there when we have to do maintenance on their hangar.
So which one should we put in?
Well, I
Any
like
consensus?
a different alternative. Or find out what this Quonset hut is, or find out about use of one of these other hangars as compared to buying, another 1.75 million.
Yeah. Well, we could definitely look. I mean, we have really kind of looked closely at everything that we have around the airport, trying to figure out something that could fit the occupancy levels that EAA, CAP tend to have. I mean, I'm not opposed to relooking at the warehouse again. We've been trying to get away from putting uses in that building that might have 30, 40, 50 people in there at a time, and that's kind of what they get in the current building. And again, I'm happy to look.
Yeah, we didn't want the soccer team, and we didn't want the theater group, but the idea of it, I mean, these are aviation people who are currently in aviation facilities on aviation property. That's a whole different element than bringing in soccer kids or theater people.
Yeah, I'm more concerned about building code issues, but when I talk about those things, but we definitely can look at that. That building's reaching the point where, sprinkler systems probably need to be looked at again, and So we're moving down that road. But
I just think, I keep coming to this cross-pollination. I just think, tools, they can be sharing tools. It's
okay. Well, let us. I mean, I've got some ideas from you. Let us play with something. Maybe it'll be easy about if you see, something in a budget format that we can put together. If there's any other thoughts on either, I think I have what I need for that. All right. Moving on to pavement maintenance. This is a fun one. Because we have so much, we have a very large federal project in 2021. They're going to be starting right about in front of the admin building, going all the way to the west, redoing Taxiway Alpha. We're not expecting a lot of other pavement projects, so the $500,000 is what we're going to put in. That's a little less than we normally do. That allow us to meet any matches of any grants DFA sends our way. I'm expecting a smaller grant in 2021 from them, probably the design engineering grant for the runway taxiway project that we're talking about with 220 and Golf. So this would help meet any match that we have on that, and then allow us to do some other miscellaneous smaller projects around the airport. We're talking about the mill and fill on taxi lanes, Tango, Mike, and possibly milling that out and paving that. Next month, I will have the 5-year for you, so you can kind of see what's coming up for federal funding. And then the pavement maintenance plan, which comes up a little bit later in the presentation, that's also about half done. Brandley's working hard on that. And here in the first part of next year, you'll get the updated full pavement maintenance plan. And then you see my last bullet on this slide talks about the feasibility of including the 220 widening and lengthening. So I'll continue looking at that. I know there's lots of questions on that, but when they reconstruct 220, if we are going to do it, that's the time to do it. So we'll want to make a decision. Now, that's still a few years out. That's not imminent, but now is the time to start the conversation on it. So any questions on pavement?
I'm good with it.
All right.
Looks good to me.
Okay. Excellent. Next one.
Yeah, same.
Okay. Looks like we're all right there. So the next one is the warehouse parking and West Hangar Row access gate. So this is something we've thought about. We've been thinking for quite some time of how to reroute the hangar tenants that use the West End hangars and trying to find a place where they can access their hangars without driving past the shop and our helicopter medevac apron. So we're thinking this would be, it's actually a little less than I have here. I got some good numbers actually yesterday. It's probably closer to 325 than 470, but I'll show you. Maybe we'll go to the next one and I'll kind of show you what this is. I want to thank Stacy for putting this little map together. She's our safety security manager and thinks a lot about these kind of things, but I showed her this idea. She really liked it, and then she added some other ideas to it. So we would end up paving the area that says additional parking, and then the area that's striped in white there would be new pavement. And we would pave that area. It would also help us to address some warehouse parking needs. And then we would actually put a new gate right there. And then the hangar tenants in November Papa Lima, and then even Mike and Juliet could access the hangar rows there in lieu of going up to gate 4, which is where they currently have to go, and then drive past all that equipment and the helicopters. So we wanted to put this out there. I can get a better price in September, but I think it's going to be about $325 to do that. And so we wanted to put that propose that in the budget also.
I think this is great. And I like the price difference. And I'm just curious about J&K access, how they get to those other 2 hangars. Will they go through gate 4?
Yeah, so they would go through gate 4, they go north, and then there's a little bit of pavement, and it's striped actually with a little stop sign, or there's a stop painted on, but there's a little vehicle access area, so they would drive in there. they may be better served with Gate 4. We're still looking at that because they don't necessarily have to drive, but they would be able to access there also. But that's up.
Okay, so J&K for now will still continue through Gate 4 probably.
They could. It may be better for them to go through Gate 4. Or they'd be able to probably go through both. But if you're in Papa, November, Mike, or Lima, you would only be able to go through that gate. That's where we'd want them to access.
And I'm just curious, I'm looking at the spacing on this map, if it's to scale, how do aircraft that are the big, because these are big wings on Papa and November, how do they get by between CareFlight and Lima?
Right there on the right side of Lima is taxiway Tango, and they all just go right through there. It's to scale, but it's a little deceiving just looking at it on an aerial like this. But there's plenty of space.
Okay.
So we'll
so they turn left and go past Lima and between Lima and CareFlight and go out to the runway.
Yes. And mixing the aircraft, a taxiing aircraft with an inbound or departing CareFlight helicopter is much better than cars and those aircraft, because they're hearing each other and talking to a tower controller, and so I don't worry about them. I worry more about cars that are moving around that area and mixing them with these incoming helicopters.
This looks good to me.
Yeah, I'm all for it.
All right, we'll put it in there. Good.
And look at all that parking that would be available, and you'd have stuff dug up if you wanted to add more bathrooms to the warehouse for EAA and CAP right there.
Sure. That's all right. Okay. Perfect. Let's go to the next slide. So we've already kind of talked a little bit about this, but the agency partnerships, housing, transit that we did last year, we were going to put $1 million in just like last year, and then you can divide it up, or you can move it between categories throughout the year to do some of the things that you're talking about. And then we did this little box down below that has your current ongoing housing, transit, and agency partnerships that are out there. And we always do that in addition. It's not part of the million. It would be in addition to the million. That's how we did it last year. And there's fewer commitments this year than you've had in the past 3 or 4 years. A lot of the transit stuff is new, but some of the things like trails and in the Tahoe and the Tahoe Vista area, that was $160,000 last year. That is cycled off, and that project's complete. So anyways, that's kind of what we're proposing for the budget. There's another slide on the community sponsorship.
How are you dividing the million up? Last year we did really scientific, a third, a third, a third.
I would leave that up to you, the board.
Well, I don't like the third. We're spending $363,000 on transit. Mary, do you need another $333,000?
Well, no, I think this gets it started, and I mean, I think
we spent a lot this year.
Yeah, and I think this is kind of ongoing, isn't it? Isn't it that same sort of budget for next year?
Well, I'm suggesting, here's what Rick Stevens is suggesting, is $500,000 for agency partnerships. Maybe, I don't know, I'm picking numbers out of the air, $250,000 more for transit and $250,000 for the JPA Truckee Tahoe Truckee Workforce Housing Agency. Now, they don't have any projects, but I have confidence in Emily Vitas doing something.
Rick, I think I understand the spirit of what you're trying to say, because by looking at a budget of $1 million, if we agree with that, and then assigning some dollar amounts to the buckets, that is one way to convey priorities of, for example, agency partnerships versus housing versus transit. But the thing that gives me some heartburn about it is right now we don't have and appropriately, we don't have complete visibility into the opportunities between transit, housing, and agency partnerships. So maybe if we talked about some splits of the dollars as aspirations or goals or targets, something a little softer than an allocation, I could get comfortable with that. But I'm also wary, well, on the one hand, I do want to acknowledge interest areas and priorities of given board members. I'm wary about us assigning Mary a dollar amount for transit and Rick a dollar amount for housing. We, and maybe that's just a shorthand way of saying it, but I'm wary of that. And I'm wary of specific allocations across the 3 potential priority areas.
So you would agree with $1 million, but not a third, a third, a third?
Yes, thanks.
Because earlier this year, I was proposing that we take money out of housing and put it into partnerships. By not putting in an allocation and having just a bullet thing, I could live with that. I just wanted more for partnerships and less for housing.
Yeah, and I love that kind of thinking as opposed to a literal allocation. Yeah.
Good point. I agree with you.
And I'm just, because I guess I'm a little confused, because these existing things add up to about 688, and what we're proposing is another million on top of it. This was a 688 last year.
Last year we had about 1.7 in all these categories together. The one thing is for instance, you got to look at that 240,000 for Lizondo.
That's not going to happen.
Hope they can get it done. Is that likely? I don't know. And then the other thing with like the JP, I'm on the JPA board, and we've got a lot of things that are cooking. We're working hard, and having some funding would be helpful. But getting, as Rick has stated in the past, getting physical housing constructed is difficult. And there are some things we're doing with housing that don't cost anything. It's just using the leverage of the or special districts that are part of that to make some things happen. But having some funding definitely helps. But we can put $1 million in there and list these 3 together into that category, and then the board you have the opportunity to allocate that throughout the year.
I just gave a thumbs up to that idea.
Okay,
That works.
4 thumbs up. All right, we'll build that in. Okay, next slide. So this year it looks like we're going to spend approximately $60,000 on our community sponsorships program. Of a $70,000 budget, so we were proposing to maybe $75,000 in 2021. Rick had the idea of doing $100. If we can get through this pandemic, and there could be a lot of energy for people to get out and redo and reconstruct some of the old programs that they did in prior years, and there could be some interest and need for some of these small sponsorships. So staff's not opposed to increasing that number. We were going to propose 75.
I like Rick's idea of 100.
And I, on a related but different topic, I just want to acknowledge the letter that we received from Lynn Larson regarding the community sponsorships. And I on the one hand, I think it's great that Lynn is paying attention to that and working to hold the board, in this case, accountable to that. I would say in the way I don't agree with her, I've been myself very comfortable about staff handling the community sponsorships. I've watched that happen for a number of years now and have no reason to believe that there's any conflict of interest or inappropriate sponsorships being awarded. And I like the staff having the speed and flexibility to award the sponsorships.
The reason I suggested 100 is this year we're not doing much because of COVID, and I'm hopeful that these events and opportunities will fire big time in 2021, and people will catch up and do more things. there's no rhyme or reason other than I was hoping we'd do more next year. And I support the staff process.
Good. Well, from a staff perspective, we take that pretty serious and we follow the policy.
I'm going to say I like the 100,000, and I agree with you, Lisa, about the staff doing the grants.
Thank you. Okay, I think we have what we need on that one. Thank you all. We'll go to the next slide. So this one's an interesting one. You've seen this times before on this Jorga Road property. The utilities for our properties there. We have a map put up here in just a second, I believe. You're going to get a more formal presentation in September with us with an exact cost number. I was hoping to be able to do this at the August meeting, but just engineers going back and forth took a little extra time, and it's about $130,000. Participate in some of these. Maybe go to the next slide. This is essentially what we would be participating on. Again, I just want to state really quick: the little fire district training facility up there has not been approved by anyone. The board. It's a concept. It was in the multi-site planning study, which was approved in concept. But I just want to make sure everyone who's watching knows that that's not. That's just there to help us understand the scale and why utility connections would be important over there. So. The water line is important to the district to get that feed into the west side of the airport. I already talked with Rem, who's the new director at the PUD. He's supportive, in concept of what we want to do there with the pressure valve. So far, we have a fire and our system drains, that valve kicks on and pumps water in another direction for fire flows, which we need at that end of the airport. There's also electrical, and then you'll see down on the bottom of that's the red is the electrical line. It's a joint trench for electrical that we need there, and then at the bottom you can also see a joint trench that's just in black. We would also propose to participate at about a third of the cost of that because we need that also for electrical and some of these other utilities that we would have going in there. So again, you're going to get a full presentation on this at the next meeting, but that is something that we've talked about in past years of potentially participating on some of those.
I believe this is very important for servicing our property along Jorga Road and on Soaring Way, and especially for fire flow in the water for the airport.
I think it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, and I think Kevin, you and Auerbach have done a great job of the, what's appropriate, which of the utilities are appropriate for our participation and which are not at this time.
So, okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's always easier and cheaper to do it trenching at one time, and then you're also not tearing up the street twice. So, support this. There's not a sewer line in here?
We have a sewer. I think you can see it up above. Maybe it's not on this map, but there's a sewer line running right past the hangars. There's a line we already have there, as well as gas. So the other utilities are already out there.
Okay.
Actually, through that fire district thing, that concept the fire district has showed to us.
So,
on this,
okay,
right?
Thank you. Yeah.
On the airport layout plan update, we're not putting this fire district training facility on it. And again, depending on how what you approve the final budget, whether it's a master plan update or ALP update, but we are proposing that as non-aeronautical property over there, so there can be some community or airport revenue, whatever you decide to do over in that area. So with these utilities stubbed in there, we'd be able to put a T in the lines that they're putting in. We would have flexibility to do that in the future. All right, we'll show you more information next week, or next month, and then we'll program that in for a look.
And for clarity, just everything to the west of the red line, that's what the town's buying as open space, correct?
Yeah, I think they're getting it for free. Are they buying it?
Okay.
I think
They are getting it for free from Soaring Ranch.
Okay. And then where our property line is southward, between Soaring Way and our property line. Have you heard any rumors of anything happening in there?
I have not. I mean, we've had a few people approach us about wanting to do development and be able to access the airport, but you can't do that.
No, we don't want that through the fence thing.
The FAA doesn't allow it, so I've made sure that people know that. But as far as any light industrial, I haven't heard anything. Anyone?
That's not our property, right?
No, that you're talking about the rectangle there, just south. E&M. Yeah, we don't own that.
Okay.
All right, moving on. So here's just, we always have a couple slides that show the studies, not quite as many studies as we've had in years past, but let me just take you through them all and then we can talk about them. So we want to finalize the pavement maintenance plan. There's $90,000 in this year's budget. The full plan is about 125, and it'll be done and presented to the board in February. And so we were just asking for another 35,000 on that.
Did we just not estimate it correctly, or did additional things come into it?
I estimated it back in the budget before, and as we started working in that, I added a few things, some falling weight deflectometer testing, and I mean I can finish it up for 90. Could definitely get a product, but I think we can make it a little bit better for another, to go up to the 35. It's something we update about every 5 or 6 years, but
yeah, are they coming out with the thumper?
They already did that.
Okay,
so that part's done.
Is there any surprises?
Nope. Overall, so far, I mean, they haven't told me that there's anything that's super pressing that, is an imminent failure. But, once we get the full plan, they'll show us everything and how we're doing.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. The next one is just, this is money we've had in the last couple of years, but continue the flight procedure development. We've got the 75,000 to continue that effort into 2021. We have go ahead, Mary.
Is that enough? And aren't we going to be starting this community outreach to talk about, Cardi's been saying we have to do all this environmental assessment and outreach, and it doesn't seem, because that's tied to flight procedures. I don't know if 75 is enough.
Yeah, Hardy, do you want to answer that question?
Yeah, we plan on using the budget we have for the bulk of the assessment work and the community outreach, lease payment for the consultant work this year. I don't see that being a problem. It may be slightly less than that or slightly more. That was just a placeholder, but I believe it suffices for now.
And we can always add more if we need it.
Yeah, and we'll make sure to keep the board updated as the cost changes.
Because, and that's the other thing is, we've got these 2 procedures that we're trying to work on with the goal. We have to do public outreach, and I'm trying to remember your timelines. But assuming we can get it through the FAA, we'd be talking late 21, early 22. Is that question mark?
I have a report later at the other board meeting later about that. But yeah, if he got it approved, it would be later in the 22 timeframe.
Later in 22.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
okay.
That's the outreach. You're going to get the assessment here of the procedures probably in September, I think is what we talked about. The actual outreach out to the public and the communities probably in December, after we're able to all assess and look at all this, and the funding that we have in this year plus this funding for next year should take us through that.
And simultaneous that, I would think, while those 2 are in the FAA world of being approved, we may want to be starting other flight procedure developments. So I just, again, back to that master plan middle section, these flight procedure developments, I just think this should be maybe a bigger number, 100, 150.
All right.
Yeah.
Let us look. We can. All right. We'll take a look at that, Mary. The next study on there is the Godby survey. So we actually talked about this a little bit last year, and looking at the timing, we decided to bring it up in 2021 to decide if the board would like to do another round of Godby survey work. We've done one in 2005, 2009, 2013. We did one in 2017, and then this would be, on that same schedule. So, do you want to include that in the budget this year?
I'm
Yes.
kind of just my opinion about Godby surveys. I mean, who answers their phone and takes 20 minutes to do a survey anymore? If I see a weird number, I don't even answer it. So maybe you could put it in the budget, I guess, but I'd want to have Godby come and talk to us about how they are reaching people in a unbiased manner. Because I just don't see it.
And it's not just phone, it's cell phone.
Yeah,
If I don't recognize them, I don't even answer.
exactly. So
Especially in this election period.
exactly. So I'm kind of a little jaded on the thing, and before we would do anything, I'd want him to prove to me that he could really get something.
Maybe another part of this conversation is where in the past we've had very clear, to us, it's been very clear what our need is for this information. And so even in the past, the 2017, I was on the ad hoc committee for that. There was a lot of doubt, even in 2017, about survey methods. And maybe what we're really struggling with here is, and Kevin, maybe I would ask you to, talk about it now or talk about it next month. No urgency on it. What's different now or the same now about how we might benefit from having the survey. Some conditions might be different now, or maybe we have more confidence in the way we're reaching out to the community and hearing from the community that the survey is less valuable to us, or maybe there's things we're missing right now that could additionally come through the survey. But it seems like we're not clear on the value of the survey. So we're picking on the process because we're not clear about what we gain from it.
Sure. Let me, I remember a lot of these same concerns were voiced in 2017, and that's exactly what they did. Is Brian, I believe is his name, came and explained how the survey community, polling and how all this works, and how they work through the cell phone process, which I found quite interesting. So we can definitely have that done, and then we can also maybe explain from a staff perspective how we use the Godby survey, because there are some interesting metrics that we try to that we measure ourselves off of from that. And I'm not 100% on board of doing it because the world is changing, and maybe there's other ways to do this. But let's maybe put it on and let me come back with some more information on it.
And the other aspect of that, because I was just pulling out my old versions of it, is when we first did it in 2005, he was saying what's important, because they asked the same questions more or less with a few others, and so now we've got 4 years of 4 survey points over time, and in his unbiased view, what is that telling us?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, because that was one of the big pushes, is ask the same questions every time with a few changes, and what trends does he notice?
Yeah, that's part of the final report that he comes and gives. He always covers that. That would be an.
Yeah, I think Lisa's on the right track, though. We need to really think about what value.
All right. Well, and what maybe I can do is next month, because the other thing is, if we as a staff look at some of these things and try and measure off of it, if the board or the public, don't have confidence in, or staff, in what's coming out of these, then obviously it's marginal value. But if we do have high confidence in some of the things that it's telling us, then it's a very valuable, it can be a very valuable tool, but we have to have confidence in it. So let me work on that. Okay. The next one on there is the bottom one, the FAA land release and property transfer. We have some money that we've spent this year. We're not going to get all of that done this year, so I've just put another little bit of money there to try and finish this up. at least the FAA process for next year. We're working through some archaeological sites that were found down there that are quite interesting. Working with TTSA on how to deal with those, and the board still has at least one more review of this before you pull the trigger on whether you want to do it or not. So that's kind of where we're at with that one.
How much have we spent so far between the surveys and
I would estimate, if you can go back almost 25 years on this transfer that we've been talking about it, but over the last 2 years we've probably spent $30,000 a year, maybe not quite that much, doing all the FAA work and the release memos that have to go to the airport district office. So.
Well, I mean, I've expressed my I will resist this. I think that land can be better used as an industrial park. And so I think that trying to get stuff off the river and I hear rumors, what did I just see? In GPAC, they were talking about a low-level bridge across from Georgia Road to Glenshire Road. And, if Georgia Road became public, I just see that's a really tremendous place to get stuff off the river and change the whole feel along the river. So I'm not in favor of this release at all. But you can put the money in and we get another bite at the apple. I'm just letting you know where.
Mary, this is not new news. Your opinion is well documented, and we voted for it in spite of your opinion.
Okay.
So you get to vote again.
Yeah, I know.
Right.
When would this actually happen, Kevin?
So much of this is at the beck and call of various folks at the FAA of when they'll look at I'm hoping.
Are we talking 2021?
Yes, you're not going to see it this year.
Well, never mind. It's after the election.
Yeah. So it's very involved, and it's a low priority project for folks at the FAA. And so we have the ways to get it moving, and I've got a good relationship with our planner, and with frequent calls, they'll move it up and work on it. But this cultural site issue that they found is significant, and it's taking some effort to make sure we do it the right way. And it's not a Native American cultural site. It's more of it's actually a place where the Chinese actually had a business out there 140 years ago. So I don't want to get into too many of the details because it's still going through the NEPA process, but it has to do with our early history here in Truckee. So it's quite interesting. So we're working through that. And it is a NEPA issue. It's not a CEQA issue. It's not a CEQA thing that we're working through, if anyone is wondering. Okay. The next one is the airport layout plan. Kind of talked about that. There's 90,000. The whole update, particularly doing the forecast. I think by the time we're done, I want to propose an additional $60,000 to do some of that work. This number is going to get adjusted because we're going to come back with some different variants on the master plan to see if the board would like to just do this or if they'd like to spend some additional funds to update the master plan or redo it altogether. So maybe hang tight on this one.
Okay.
The next one is the update to the airport safety gap analysis. That we did in 2015. It's been highly useful. It's what we're going to ask is Convergent Performance did the original one to update it and kind of look and see how we've done, and then see what improvements we can make. So we wanted to redo that study this year. That one. And the last one, there's the some additional funding for PAPI analysis. So that's the Precision Approach Path Indicator. This we can roll into some of the procedure work, but it is analysis/study work. We really want to make sure we understand if we have to have additional PAPIs and VASIs on these runways where we're proposing new procedures, and it's likely we will, and so we want to get that process, also looking at it so we don't get surprised when we procedure work that is looking good and then find out we need a PAPI. So
And then that's to do the analysis. How much would a PAPI VASI cost?
that they're expensive and they are AIP eligible. So
Okay.
do you have an idea of what a PAPI is? Hey, Hardy, do you have an idea of what a PAPI runs?
Non-funded without the FAA's help, anywhere from 400,000 to 1.1 million.
Okay, that's without FAA. And would these, don't they have to be on the ALP to be considered by the FAA?
They do, and that's one of the things we're looking at right now. But also, just remember, these are for approaches, not departure procedures. So we can get departure approved without, but for approaches.
Yeah, slightly non-standard. So if you can fit them into the standardized criteria for the FAA, they usually will fund them as a lower priority. So depending on the approach procedures, we may get partial funding, complete funding, or no funding at all.
Okay. So will these be in the airport layout plan that we're updating?
Yes.
Okay.
We will put them on. Whether or not they will approve them, that's
Right.
the got to work through. But we will definitely show these on there.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. All right. So we'll turn it over to Kelly. This is the last slide. Everyone's done great. So we still have about 40 minutes. We don't have to take all that time, but we also, at the end, we like to take you through just some of the big ticket items in the budget, just to see if there's any questions that we can prepare more information or answer now. I'll turn it over to Kelly.
Thanks, Kevin. This is just kind of everything that's left. That's not a huge giant project, but still money we'd like to spend. Air show every year, striping for the runway and taxiways, network and security GIS web surface equipment, forest management improvements. We'd like to replace one of the tugs for $35,000 and get an equipment mobile lift system for $70,000.
What is that?
Excuse me?
What is that?
So it's a my understanding, and our ops guys have put this in their budget request for a few years now, and I've put it in this year. But essentially, they can move a lift system out to a large piece of equipment, and when I mean large, like our blowers, things like that, and be able to get them off the ground to do work on tires or underneath. So that's my understanding. Dave may be on. He can maybe give me a little more information, or if I have that wrong. That's what I understand it is.
It's not for a recovering aircraft. We do other things for.
Working on our
own equipment.
Our own equipment. On our,
Okay.
Yeah, Mary, Dave Hoffman here. It is for lifting some of our heavier equipment. Presently, we only have a lift that's rated for some of our flatbeds and the van and things. So we needed, and still do need, something that can lift the larger items off the ground. And these items are mobile. We can move it from one bay to another, as opposed to designating one bay in the shop only for this equipment.
What do we do now?
We it's like building a pyramid, and we use jacks and blocks, which could be continued effective, but the time consuming and then the having to crib up or block up the equipment is less stable than the ability to have these 4 pillars, one on each wheel of the vehicle, to be able to lift it that way.
Yeah, I agree. My and I'm support this in the concept, and I just wonder, with all the different special districts we have who all have heavy equipment, does everybody have to own one, or is there things where we can lease one, need it from the town, or they can lease it from us, or this Truckee Sanitary District, or the sewer agency, or the fire department? Because does everybody have to have one of everything?
No, I don't believe we do, but in the time of need, sometimes folks are less willing. Now, that is also an avenue that we have not gone down to look at, but I'll talk it up with my group, and we'll start with the town of Truckee to find out. Being we're all relatively close to one another, we're more than happy to share what we have also.
Exactly. That's what I'm looking at. It's, they could borrow it from us and pay, how we work
Absolutely.
together. I keep flashing my 21 million, and everybody, how do we work as a team across the whole region?
We'll look into that.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
So back to the list here. Next, we have 645,000 slated to do all the items, not all the items, but a lot of the items in the facility maintenance plan that we'll present in October. 25,000 for an additional airport perimeter fence, 960 for our tower and studies on the tower.
I'm curious about this tower. What are the studies?
Kevin, did you want to talk about that part?
We may not. Last year we put a little bit of money in there because we're just under 900,000 for the staffing.
$2,356 a day.
Thought that we should put a little bit of money. Like one of the things Hardy and I were talking about today is that we're just about to issue a new RFP for tower staffing because the Midwest contract is coming due here in May, and so we're going to be starting that process again. So it just gave us a little bit of a cushion if there's some things we needed to look at or we needed to involve some consultants to make this program successful. I don't know exactly what that might be, but a little bit of money in there. We don't necessarily have to have it. Hardy, you want to add anything to that?
No, I think you clarified it.
Okay, I was just noticing. I mean, because under the current contract, we're paying, like I say, $2,365 a day. So now this 960 is $2,630 a day. Or two people in. And how is that paid? Is that through 100, 600, or not all 800? How is that being funded?
I believe it's 800, but I can double check.
Because it seems to me that, it is community benefit, but it also is pilot benefit. And it seems like somehow when we're looking at our rates, fees, and charges, that some of that tower staffing cost should be paid for by the users. It's like when I look at all these different agencies who get public money, they're not charging their true rates, fees, and charges because they have this other pot of money and money is fungible. It seems to me that some of this 960 should be paid for through 100. Which would mean we'd need to address how we're charging for fuel or hangars or our SASOs on site.
Yeah, I mean, what you're saying, Mary, it really dives into the whole allocation side of the house because I can't say for sure that they're not already paying for it because we haven't, gone through one of those elaborate allocation studies to find out how that money flows back and forth. They may not be, paying for any of it, but strictly going off the 100, 600, 800, it's good. It gives us an idea of what those departments are spending. But I don't know that it necessarily conveys back and forth as to whether or not aeronautical revenue is covering something or non-aeronautical or property tax. But that, that's something we're going to tackle here and talk about it, with in September in the budget, and see if we get some better clarity on it.
Please. Thank you.
There's just one more page here of additional items. So we have our RASC membership, the bike share, if they want to redo that whole program. A new sign on Airport Road in 267. The ongoing funding commitments that were multi-year community partnerships like the Boys and Girls Club Excellence in Education, for example. We have 90,000 for obstruction removal, $60 for the admin building snow melt system. That's been on there for a few years, but we're hoping to get that done in 2021. Playground expansion that we had talked about earlier, and $50,000 for greenhouse gas programs.
And under this 50,000 greenhouse gas reduction strategies and programs, another element of that would be educational outreach. And I could see putting more money into that as well. Let's bump that to 75.
We can do that. Is everyone good with that?
I am.
Okay.
Likewise, yes.
Okay. Excellent. Well, that helps a lot. Okay, last slide. I think we have one more.
Yep. And this is just reiterating our upcoming deadlines and when we're going to talk about the budget next, or we'll come with it on September 23rd. If we need to do any special meetings, we certainly can do that. The second review, October 28th, and the final approval will be December 2nd.
I will tell you that the September and October board meetings are quite full. And we'll talk about this in the next meeting on the rolling agenda. And the reason I bring that up is we talk about special meetings. If there are things that we need to cover after, when you see the first version of the September budget, the preliminary draft 1, if we need to get together independent of the board meeting to talk through some of those things, we may need to do that. But we'll see how we do. We'll see what our bottom line looks like after we incorporate a bunch of this stuff in, and maybe we'll be okay. That's all I have. I appreciate everybody's input. If there's anything else, happy to take any other.
We should see if there's any public comment on any of these items.
Yeah, let's do that. Any public comment?
Yeah, and could we stop the screen share for towards the end of the meeting?
Yeah.
Throughout the budget meeting, not receive any public comment.
No public comment. Is that what you said?
0 public comment. Thanks for checking.
I move we adjourn the budget workshop, and thanks to the staff for all the prep work.
I'll second.
Stop.
Nope.
Stop.
All right.
Rick?
The stop was not directed at this meeting. It was to my wife, who brought me a glass of water. I agree. Are we voting this thing to adjourn? I vote aye.
Yes.
All right, I think we have to do roll call, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Correct. Roll call.
Yes, roll call?
Yes.
Yes, roll call.
Okay.
Yes, roll call.
Vice President Hetherington?
Yes.
Okay. Director Morrison, I believe he's absent. President Odette?
Yes.
Stevens?
Yes.
Director Wallace?
Yes.
All right, well, we'll see everyone.
Awesome.
Thank you all.
See you guys. Bye.
Bye-bye.